What if the person who left you actually wanted you to become something powerful after they walked away? What if their rejection was not the end of your story, but the beginning of a version of yourself they never believed you could be? If you have ever been left by an avoidant, if you have ever felt like you were not enough for someone who could not even tell you what they needed, then this video is going to change the way you see everything that happened to you. I need you to stay until the very end because what I am about to share with you is going to rewire how you think about being rejected, and it is going to give you back something that nobody should have taken from you in the first place. Let me ask you something. When an avoidant walks away from you, what is the first thing your mind tells you? Most people start asking themselves what they did wrong. They replay every moment, every conversation, every text message, looking for the mistake they made. They convince themselves that if they had just been quieter or louder or more patient or less emotional, then things would have been different. And that is exactly the trap. That is exactly where they want you to stay. Because the truth is, when an avoidant decides to leave, they have already made peace with losing you long before they actually said goodbye. They were not confused. They were not uncertain. They were simply waiting for the right moment to protect themselves from feeling anything at all. Now here is what most people never realize. Every single avoidant, every person who runs when things get too real, carries a secret wish inside their head. They wish that the person they are leaving behind would become something they could never admit out loud. They wish that the rejection would somehow transform you into a version of yourself that proves they made the right decision. They want you to shrink. They want you to cry, to beg, to chase them, to show them that you cannot survive without them. Because if you do that, then their fear of intimacy gets justified. Their decision gets validated. They can tell themselves that nobody really understood them anyway, and that is why they had to leave. But there is another path, and it is the one they are terrified of. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of their rejection. It is not the version they expect. It is not the version they are hoping for. In fact, it is the complete opposite of everything they wanted you to become. And that is exactly why it is so powerful. When an avoidant rejects you, they are handing you one of the greatest gifts a human being can receive. They are giving you the permission to finally choose yourself, not because you do not care about them, but because your survival depends on it. And the moment you understand this, the moment you see their rejection for what it really is, everything changes. So what is the version of yourself that every avoidant secretly wants you to become after they are gone? It is the version that does not need them anymore. It is the version that looks at the situation with clear eyes and says, I see what you did and I am not broken by it. It is the person who builds themselves back up without ever having to look back. It is the soul that learns to love with full open hands again, knowing that someone might leave, but choosing to be brave anyway. That is the version they are afraid of. That is the version that haunts them in the quiet moments when they are alone with their own thoughts. Here is what you need to understand about human psychology. We are wired to respond to rejection with either shame or growth. Those are the only two options. Shame keeps you stuck. Shame makes you smaller. Shame whispers in your ear that you deserved what happened to you. But growth is the loudest voice in the room when you decide to pick it. Growth says you did not break me. You simply showed me who I was before I found myself. And that difference, that single shift in how you respond to pain, is what separates the people who stay broken from the people who come back stronger than ever before. So if you are watching this video right now and you have been carrying the weight of someone is leaving, I need you to hear me clearly. Their rejection was never about your worth. It was never about your value. It was about their inability to stay present when things started to feel real. And the moment you stop making their fear about you, the moment you stop carrying the shame they tried to hand you, everything begins to shift. You start to rebuild, not because you are trying to prove anything to them, but because you finally understand that you were never broken. You were just waiting for the right moment to become free. Now here is your reward for staying this far. In the next section, I'm going to show you exactly what that transformation looks like from the inside. I'm going to break down the psychological shift that happens when you stop chasing and start rising. This is where it gets real. This is where everything changes. So do not go anywhere because what comes next is going to stay with you long after you finish watching. The weeks after they leave are the most dangerous days of your life. Not because anything physical happens to you, but because something inside your mind begins to attack itself. You wake up feeling fine for a few minutes, And then it hits you, the silence where their name used to be, the empty space on the couch where they used to sit, the phone that stays dark when you hoped it would buzz one more time, and in that silence, your brain starts running a program that was never designed to protect you. It starts telling you that you were not good enough. It starts replaying every moment where you maybe laughed too loud, or asked for too much, or showed too much of your heart. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to accept the story they never even asked you to believe. That is the trap. That is the exact trap that keeps thousands of people stuck in pain long after the actual relationship has ended. Your mind takes the rejection and uses it as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Rejection does not destroy your identity. It only reveals how much of your identity you had given away to someone who was never going to hold it safely. Think about that for a second. How much of who you thought you were was actually built around being chosen by them? How many of your decisions were shaped by whether they would approve or agree or stay? When you realize that your sense of self had merged so deeply with their presence, the pain starts to make a different kind of sense. It is not just that you lost them. It is that you lost the version of yourself that existed only in relation to them. Now let me show you what the avoidant expects to happen to you after they leave. They expect you to fall apart. They expect you to send that message saying you cannot live without them. They expect you to call 100 times until they stop picking up. They expect you to beg, to negotiate, to lower your standards just to have them back for one more week. And the cruelest part is, part of them wants you to do exactly that, because if you chase, then they can tell themselves that you were the one with the problem. They can avoid looking at their own fear by pointing at your desperation. They can protect their narrative and never have to admit that they were the ones who ran when love got real. But there is another path. And most people miss it completely. What they do not expect, what they cannot predict, is that you will wake up one morning and choose differently. They do not expect that you will stop chasing and start rebuilding. They do not expect that you will look at everything they did and say, I see you clearly now, and I am still going to be okay. They do not expect you to become someone who loves deeply, but also walks away when it is not right. They expect bitterness. They expect you to close your heart forever and become hard and cold and guarded. Because that is what fear wants everyone to become. Fear wants you to believe that love is dangerous, that openness is weakness, that the safest thing to do is close the door and never open it again. But here is what fear never counts on. It never counts on the human being who decides that pain is not going to be their teacher. It never counts on the person who looks at heartbreak and says, I felt this, I grieved this, and I am choosing to grow anyway. That person is the one who becomes unstoppable. That person is the one who walks into the next chapter of life carrying strength instead of scars. And that is exactly the version that haunts the avoidant in the middle of the night when they are lying alone, wondering if they made the biggest mistake of their life. The fear of becoming bitter is real. I am not going to pretend it is not. There are moments when the anger feels easier than the healing. There are days when closing off seems safer than opening up again. And if you stay in that darkness long enough, something inside you does start to change. Not into a stronger version of yourself, but into a smaller one. A person who flinches when someone gets close. A person who already knows how to leave before they ever get left. That is the trap inside the trap. You do not just lose the relationship. You almost lose yourself, but you have not lost yourself, not yet. And that is what makes this moment so important. The decision you make right now in the middle of this pain is going to determine everything that comes next. You can let this rejection become the story you tell about yourself for the next 5 years. Or you can let it become the moment you finally stopped shrinking and started becoming who you were always supposed to be. Here is what they actually want you to become after they walk away. Not what they say, not what they show, but what lives in the quiet place inside their head when they think about you late at night. They want you to become the version of yourself that proves their fear was justified. They want you to become proof that love is dangerous, that opening your heart leads to pain, that the safest thing you can do is close the door and never open it again. Because if you become that person, then they were not wrong to leave. They were just being smart. They were just protecting themselves from exactly what they knew would happen eventually. That is the story they are hoping you will live out. That is the ending they are counting on. But I need you to refuse that ending. Right here, right now, I need you to choose a different story entirely. The version you are meant to become after an avoidant rejects you is not smaller. It is not harder. It is not closed. It is the most expanded, open, powerful version of who you actually are. It is the person who looks at the exact moment when someone chose to leave and says, I felt that. I grieved that. And I am still going to love again with my whole heart anyway. That is the person they are terrified of. That is the person they did not think you could be. And that is exactly why they did not stay long enough to find out. See, there is something deeply human inside all of us that craves security. When someone leaves, your brain immediately starts building walls. It says, do not trust again. Do not open again. Do not give anyone else the chance to walk away like this. And those walls feel protective for a while. They feel safe, but they are not keeping you safe. They are keeping you small. They are keeping you stuck in a version of your life where you never have to risk getting hurt, but you also never get to experience what actually living feels like. The real transformation happens when you decide to take the pain and turn it into wisdom, not into armor, not into hardness, but into a deeper understanding of who you are and what you deserve. You start to recognize your own value in a way you never did before. You stop begging people to stay who were never planning to stay anyway. You stop making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. You stop apologizing for having needs, for wanting closeness, for believing that connection should feel safe and not terrifying. Here is the psychological truth nobody talks about enough. Every avoidant carries a deep fear of being truly known. That is why they leave when things get real. Not because they do not love you, but because they are terrified of what happens when someone sees all of them and decides to stay anyway. So when they leave, part of them is hoping you will become like them, hoping you will also learn to hide, to protect yourself, to never let anyone get close enough to hurt you again. Because if you become like them, then their behavior gets normalized. It becomes less scary. It becomes just another example of how everyone eventually protects themselves and nobody truly stays. But you do not have to become that. You do not have to let their fear shape your future. What happens when you choose differently is almost magical to watch. You start attracting people who match your openness instead of people who run from it. You stop settling for half of someone's heart when you know you deserve all of it. You develop a sense of peace that comes from knowing you can survive anything, including someone walking away. You become the kind of person who loves fiercely and walks away gracefully when the love is not being returned. You become the person who does not need someone to stay in order to feel whole. The life you build from this point forward is going to look completely different from the one you were living before. Not because the avoidant broke you, but because they freed you. They gave you the permission you never knew you needed to stop making yourself fit into someone else's comfort zone. They gave you the space to discover that you were never too much, that you were never too emotional, that you were never too demanding of the basic respect and presence that every human being deserves. You were just too much for someone who was not ready to meet you, and that is not a flaw. That is a reflection of your depth, your capacity to love, your willingness to be all the way present in a relationship. These are the qualities that make you extraordinary, not the qualities that make you disposable. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The moment you start living from this place, something inside you shifts permanently. You stop chasing. You start attracting. You stop performing for approval and start showing up as your full, authentic self. And the people who can handle that version of you will not run. They will not flinch when things get real. They will stay because they recognize what they have found, and they will not let go easily. That is the person you are becoming, not because someone believed in you, because you decided to believe in yourself when nobody else did. That is the power of choosing growth over protection. That is the transformation they never thought you would make, and that is exactly why it matters so much. You are not the person they left behind anymore. You have already become something else, something different, something they did not see coming, and something they will think about more than they will ever admit to themselves. Every single day from this moment forward, you are building a life that proves their exit was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of a chapter they were never going to be part of. And that is not sadness you are carrying. That is clarity. That is the kind of understanding that only comes after you have been broken open and chosen to rebuild anyway. There are going to be nights when you still feel the weight of what happened. There are going to be moments when the old pain surfaces, and your first instinct is to wonder if you could have done something different. I want you to hear me when I tell you this. Those moments do not mean you have failed. They mean you have loved deeply enough to feel the full weight of loss. That is not weakness. That is the evidence of how much capacity you carry inside your heart. And the fact that you are still standing, still breathing, still moving forward tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. Rejection is redirection. That is not just a phrase. That is the truth hiding inside every single moment when someone walks away from you. They are not punishing you. They are not telling you that you are not worthy. They are simply moving out of your story so that the right person can move in. And the right person is not going to need you to shrink. They are not going to need you to be less than what you are. They are going to need you to be exactly who you are becoming right now in this moment as you refuse to let pain be your teacher and growth be your answer. You do not need them to come back and apologize. You do not need them to realize what they lost. You do not need them to ever think about you again in the quiet hours of their own life. What you need is already inside you. It has been there the whole time. It is the part of you that survived when everything told you to give up. It is the part of you that kept going when your own mind was trying to convince you that you were broken. It is the part of you that woke up every single day and chose to try again, even when trying felt impossible. That part of you is your power, and nobody can take it from you except you. From today forward, you are not going to carry this rejection as a wound anymore. You are going to carry it as a badge, proof that you showed up completely in a relationship and it did not work out, and you are still whole. Proof that someone left and you did not disappear. Proof that your capacity to love did not diminish when someone chose not to receive it. Your heart is not damaged. Your heart is not closed. Your heart is exactly as open as it has always been, and that openness is going to lead you somewhere they will never get to see. Go become the person you were before they ever walked into your life. Go become the person you were before you started dimming yourself to fit into their comfort. Go become the person who loves without conditions, who stays present without fear, who builds something real with someone who has the courage to stay. You have everything you need to do that starting right now. You have everything you need to do that starting with this breath. This is not goodbye. This is the moment your life becomes yours again, and it is going to be extraordinary.